Good morning. We are in part 4 of a sermon series this morning that we've been going through, that we've been calling Signs of Jesus. We've been looking at different miracles that Jesus performs as they are recorded in the Gospel of John, and we are considering from each of those what it is that Jesus wants to do in our own lives. How is it that he is working these types of things out today for those who follow him? In other words, for someone who's following Christ, what are the signs of Christ in that person's life? And so today we're on part 4 of that. We're going to look at a fun story, one that perhaps a lot of us are familiar with, where Jesus feeds a whole lot of people. So I'll start out with a question for you this morning. Have you ever been hungry? How many of you are hungry right now? That little time change gets you. You should be, 12, 15? When you're hungry, sometimes you will go to extreme measures to get something onto your stomach. You remember, some of you may remember there's a story in Genesis, the first book of the Bible, where there's two brothers, Jacob and Esau. Esau is kind of this outdoors kind of a guy, wears flannel shirts and does things outside, and Jacob, his brother, is more of a domestic type. He's in the kitchen a lot, and so Esau comes in one day. He's been outdoors all day, and he's hungry, and Jacob there has a bowl of soup that he's been preparing, and Esau says to his brother, "I'm hungry, give me some soup, I'm about to die." And Jacob, like any good sibling, takes opportunity and says, "If you will turn over to me, Esau, your entire inheritance, I'll give you a bowl of soup." Which we laugh at because that's ridiculous, right? Esau says, "I'm in. I'm there," and he literally gives up his entire inheritance just to get some food onto his belly. When you're hungry, you will do anything to try and get full. What's interesting is that the scriptures teach us that we are born not just with physical appetites, we're born with a spiritual appetite. Paul references this in his letter to the Philippians. He writes to them, and he's referencing people who have rejected Christ. And he says about them, their God is their stomach. In other words, they go through life trying to use physical things, natural things, to fill them up with what can only be filled up supernaturally. And so what we want to look at today is how Jesus alone can satisfy us and fill our spiritual hunger that we are born with. And again, we're going to do that through a fun story where we see Jesus feeding a lot of people. In John chapter 6, he feeds a multitude of people. What we're going to do simply as we walk through that passage is we're going to look at 4 things. We'll pull 4 things out of that passage that we can try to fill ourselves up with. Things that we often try and substitute for Jesus to try and have a full life that always leave us wanting and needing something more. So there's a very simple outline on the back of your bulletin. If you want to follow along with that, we'll just fill in these 4 spaces of different things that, if we're not careful, can kind of creep in and we try to use to fill up our lives. And so you can jot those down as we go through them if you want to. So let's start off. John chapter 6, we'll start in verses 1 through 4. After this, now this that we're talking about here is what Jeremy talked to us about last week. This miracle that Jesus performs in Jerusalem where he heals this lame man. After that happened, after this, Jesus went away to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, which is also the Sea of Tiberias, and a large crowd was following him because they saw the signs that he was doing on the sick. Jesus went up on the mountain, and there he sat down with his disciples. Now, the Passover, the feast of the Jews, was at hand. So we find Jesus here. He's trying to get away. All right, he's trying to withdraw. It says that he withdraws to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, into a region, an area that's kind of mountainous. You know what this calls for, right? A map. We got to have a map. I know. I forgot my pointer, and there's one up here. That's amazing. I got to make sure I can point it. There we go. Okay, so Jesus has been, that's little. Way down south, he's been in Jerusalem. He comes back up, and he goes to the other side of the Sea of Galilee, and he's probably over in this region somewhere over here. One of the ways that we know that, oh, you can't even see it? Just going to put this down. All right. If you look over at kind of the top right-hand side of the Sea of Galilee, you see this little town called Bethsaida. Someone else is doing something. All right. Jim is. I feel like we're getting off to a rocky start. Okay. Okay. So you see Bethsaida up there. That's mentioned in another one of the accounts of this story, and so we think that Jesus probably is over on this top right-hand part of the Sea of Galilee somewhere. You may recognize that today this is referred to as the Golan Heights. You ever heard of that region, the Golan Heights? This is a border area between modern-day Israel and modern-day Syria. There's fighting that happens there a lot. So this is probably exactly where Jesus is. He's in this mountainous region that we know today as the Golan Heights. He's trying to withdraw, but all these people keep following him. In fact, the number of people who are following him is growing. It's escalating. And why? Why? Because they see signs that he's doing. Back to our title of our series here now, right? The signs of Jesus. They see these signs, and so they keep following him. Why are these signs attracting them to him? Well, the reason he's doing these signs is so they can see who he is and recognize him for his significance. But they're kind of missing all that. In fact, we get a little bit of commentary on this a couple of chapters before this. Back in John chapter 2, we have a little bit of an understanding of what's going on in John chapter 2, verses 23. Did I give you those, Jim? Jim, I even checked, and I still missed it, didn't I? Okay. John chapter 2, verses 23 to 25, says this. When Jesus was in Jerusalem at the Passover feast, many believed his name when they saw the signs that he was doing. Now, that sounds good, right? Let's keep reading. But Jesus, on his part, did not entrust himself to them. Why? Because he knew all people. He needed no one to tell him about people or to bear witness to him about man. He himself knew what was in man. Now, that's a little bit of a scary verse right there. What is it that is inside of us that Jesus took a step back from? What is it that's inside of these people following Jesus that he's not willing to entrust himself to them? Well, it's this innate, inherent tendency that all of us have when we're born to be self-serving. We are born with ourselves on the throne of our lives. And we will take whatever we can get our hands on and use it to serve ourselves. And this is exactly what the crowds following Jesus are wanting to do. Do you know what they're most interested in from Jesus at this point? And this is number one on your outline. What they are most interested in from Jesus at this point is entertainment. They want to be entertained. They found a guy who can put on a pretty good magic show. So let's go watch him. Now, is there anything wrong with entertainment? No. Now, for instance, perhaps like many of you, this past week, I got totally caught up in the Cubs winning the World Series, right? I mean, this is fun, right? So, like the Cubs, the lovable losers, they've never won or whatever in 100 years, and they win the World Series, right? That's fun, okay? That's entertaining. That's fun. Nothing wrong with that. So when does entertainment become Not a good thing. Well, it becomes not a good thing when we pursue it as the thing we try and fill up our lives on. Where that's the thing that we look to try and have a full life. Our culture loves being entertained. We as a culture provide thousands of ways upon ways upon ways to be entertained. It's so easy to be entertained. We love to be entertained. But when we take that and then we start applying it to Jesus as if he exists to just entertain us, he exists to just help us be like fun and happy and everything's just wonderful all the time. We just expect him to entertain us. That's not exactly how he describes what it looks like to follow him. It's similar to a story that he tells one time about a person who goes out and throws seed out on different types of ground. And depending on the type of ground that the seed hits, it determines how well the seed sprouts up and grows. And one of the types of ground he throws this seed on is rocky ground. And the seed takes root and it begins to grow, but as soon as it gets to something hard, it gets squashed. And Jesus compares this to someone who perhaps responds to the Lord in what seems like genuine faith initially, but then as soon as hard things come, as soon as it stops being fun and entertaining, their faith dwindles, it withers. If you and I have a faith that's based on entertainment, if we think that Jesus exists just to entertain us all the time, it will not look pretty for us when things get difficult. It's like having a diet where all you eat is sugar, right? It's fun for a while, and buddy, the crash is coming, right? You can't get filled up on entertainment. The church doesn't exist for us to just come and be entertained, right? We don't want to spin some kind of version of Christianity that, hey, be a Christian, it's fun all the time. It's not fun all the time. All right, so that's number one. All right, number two, let's keep going. Verses 5 through 9. We'll keep reading here. Lifting up his eyes, then, this is Jesus, and seeing that a large crowd was coming toward him, Jesus said to Philip, "Where are we to buy bread so that these people may eat?" Oh, don't miss verse 6. He said this to Philip to test him. For he himself, Jesus, knew what he was going to do. Philip answered him, 200 denarii worth of bread would not be enough for each of them to just get a little. One of his disciples, Andrew, Simon Peter's brother, said to him, hey, for what it's worth, there's a boy here who has 5 barley loaves and 2 fish. But, I mean, what are they for so many, right? Jesus has this crowd of people. He's been teaching them. He's been healing them throughout the day. It's getting to the end of the day, and they're getting hungry. Now, Jesus here, don't miss this. From the very beginning, he knows what he's going to do. He knows. I don't know when he decided that he was going to do it, but he knows. He knows exactly what he's going to do. So, he's going to have some conversation now with Philip and with Andrew. Now, probably the reason he picks Philip is because we're told in another one of the accounts of this miracle that Philip is from Bethsaida. Remember I or somebody pointed out Bethsaida up here with a pointer. That's where Philip is from. And so probably on one level, Jesus knows that Philip kind of knows this area. He knows this region. And he says, hey, Philip, where can we get something to eat around here? Now, think of the hilarity of that question. I mean, even if Philip had known where to go get something to eat, Sam's Club didn't exist, right? There's no bulk shopping. There's nowhere that has this amount of food for this number of people. And in fact, Philip says this, right? Philip fails the test, by the way. I don't know if you caught that. Jesus is testing him to see if he can come to this with a perspective of faith. He does not do that, okay? He does not do that. He says, you know, Jesus, we could have a great amount of money. This amount of money he references is probably about 6 months worth of wages. He says, even if we had 6 months worth of wages and we went and bought all the food that we could with that, we might be able to give everybody one bite. He said, we don't have the resources. We don't have the abilities to do this. So then, apparently, Andrew has been doing something over here, and perhaps a boy has come forward to show him, hey, I've got a snack that my mom sent with me. It's not likely that Andrew went out and found this boy, because even when he presents him, he's like, check out this weird kid over here. He thinks he's got something he can offer, right? Both of these guys fail. Why? Because of number 2 on our list. They're living by natural resources and abilities. Natural resources or abilities. They are going through life, navigating their life by what they think they're capable of pulling off in their own natural resources and abilities. Can you relate to that? How often do you and I do that? How often do you and I approach life with this perspective of, I know what I'm capable of, and I can pull it off by myself? I mean, we can do that even while we're like singing praise songs, right? Oh, I love to sing this praise song. Now I'm just going to go live on my own natural resources and abilities. That's like a default. We just have a tendency to go there consistently. The problem is, all of us will eventually come to a situation, a relationship, a problem, a difficulty, a trial, a hardship that our natural resources and abilities cannot answer. That's what Philip and Andrew run smack into right here. We got no natural resources and abilities to know how to even approach this problem. And Jesus runs them into it intentionally to show them, you can produce all kinds of wonderful things through your natural resources and abilities, but they will eventually run out. You know what Jesus is trying to teach them here, what principle he's trying to teach them? Is not that we live life by our natural resources and abilities, but even when we're willing to bring the little bit of natural resource and ability that we have to God and we give it to Him, He can do something with it that blows our minds. That's the principle he's trying to tell them. There's a great Old Testament story that illustrates this. You ever heard of David and Goliath? Remember heard of that? Same principle, right? You have this massive, big warrior guy that everybody's afraid of. David, this little shepherd boy, picks up some rocks, and he says, I'll go take this guy down with some rocks. Why? Not because he's a great rock guy, but because he's going there in the power and in the Spirit of the Lord. He's taking his little rocks and he's saying, God, I got some rocks here, and if you can do something with them, that'd be great. And God takes down Goliath. The same principle. Limited natural resources and abilities, but once offered to God, He can do something with them that blows our minds. You know, I think it's a good thing for us to realize that we have limited natural resources and abilities. I mean, if you look at your life and you think, I really don't have that much to offer, that's a good starting point. Because all that we can do in that situation is say, all right, God, this is all I've got to offer you, and so I'm going to trust that you can take it and turn it into something that ministers life to people. That's a great place to be. For those of us who are trusting in our own natural resources and abilities, our ability to have a plan for everything, you will eventually run into something that you can't plan out. It's coming. That's number 2. All right, number 3, let's keep going. Verses 10 to 13. Jesus said, have the people sit down. And just in case you were wondering, there was much grass in the place. So the men sat down, about 5,000 in number. Jesus then took the loaves, and when He had given thanks, He distributed them to those who were seated. So also the fish, as much as they wanted. And when they had eaten their fill, they were stuffed. He told His disciples, gather up the leftovers, that nothing may be lost. So they gathered them up and filled 12 baskets with fragments from the barley loaves left by those who had eaten. So the miracle happens. He gets everybody to sit down. We're told that there are 5,000 men here. That means there's probably, 10 to 15,000 people total when you get women and children in there as well. He takes this little boy's snack and he offers a thanksgiving for it, probably a traditional Jewish thanksgiving where he recognizes God as being sovereign over the earth, and he's the one who brings bread from the earth. And then he turns this snack into an all-you-can-eat buffet. And he just starts handing it out. And people are gorging themselves on it. They're eating as much as they can. So much so that they eat as much as they can, and then there's still some left over. Incredible. Unbelievable. Hard to even fathom that something like this could happen. But you know what the problem is with this miracle? The next day, folks were hungry again. We know, verse 20, look at verse 26 here. Next day, people come looking for Jesus, and he answers them, "Truly I say to you, you are seeking me not because you saw signs, but because I got you full. You ate your fill of the loaves." Jesus rebukes them. This is a great miracle, except it doesn't last. And Jesus is going to use this to communicate a hugely important lesson about what's number 3 on our outline. And that's this: physical needs. Physical needs. These folks were so focused on getting their physical needs met that they were missing the significance of who Jesus is. And if you and I aren't careful, we can do the same thing. We can have a good income. We can have a good job. We can drive a decent car, live in a decent house, have a good retirement plan, get a lot of physical needs taken care of, and then just kind of sit back and think, wait, I'm good. This goes right back. Jeremy nailed it last week. This has been rattling around in my brain all week since he said this. Remember when he was talking about the lame man who Jesus healed physically, and then Jesus goes back and has a conversation with him and says, hey, there are things that are more important than your physical needs. Yeah, you're physically sick, but there is a spiritual sickness that is far greater for us to talk about than just your physical sickness. Same kind of issue here. And Jesus kind of takes this point and he unpacks it later on in the chapter, starting in verse 48. And look what he starts doing here. Jesus says to them, I am the bread of life. Your fathers ate the manna in the wilderness, and they died. This is the bread that comes down from heaven, so that one may eat of it and not die. What is this bread? Jesus says, I am the living bread that came down from heaven. If anyone eats of this bread, he will live forever. And the bread that I will give for the life of the world is my flesh. What does Jesus do here? He takes us from our physical hunger to exposing our spiritual hunger. He says, hey, you're born with this appetite for something more than what physical things can provide you with, and I'm the one who can satisfy you. There is something that we need more than just physical things. There is sickness inside of our heart. There are spiritual issues that go down to the core of who we are. This whole idea of serving ourselves and being our own God. And Jesus comes to pay the penalty for our rejection of God in that, to die in our place, to take our punishment. And then he's resurrected again so that he can offer us forgiveness and new life. He says, the bread that I will give is my own flesh. And we just acted it out, didn't we? We just acted it out. Every week when we take communion, when we take of the bread and we drink of the cup, we participate in this symbolic act where we take a piece of bread and we physically eat it, signifying that we are taking Christ in spiritually and we are receiving what He has done on our behalf. Physical bread will never be enough to satisfy you. You can get your entire physical everything lined up in life and you will still be hungry. Getting physical needs met is not enough. We need something more. Their ancestors ate manna in the wilderness and they died. I had a good job, but then I died. I had a good retirement plan, but then I died. I had good meals to eat, but then I died. We're all, none of these things bring what we need, which is eternal life. Only Christ. Only Christ. Last one. Verses 14 and 15. When the people saw the sign that he had done, they said, "This is indeed the prophet who is to come into the world." Perceiving then that they were about to come and take him by force to make him king, Jesus withdrew again to the mountain by himself. Now, the people see Jesus do this, and they start some gears start turning in their mind. They're like, hey, it seems like we've kind of heard about this, or we've been told something about some guy coming into the world and doing this. And in fact, this is true. If you look back in the book of Deuteronomy, God comes and tells Moses that he's going to raise up a prophet similar to him but greater than him. We'll just read it real quick. God speaking to Moses, and he says, "The Lord your God will raise up for you a prophet like me from among you, from your brothers, and it is to him that you shall listen." So the people, they remember this prophecy. They see Jesus do something very similar to what Moses did, right? When's the last time that they ate bread that came out of nowhere? It's when manna came down for their ancestors in the wilderness. They see Jesus basically do a very similar thing here, and they start putting the pieces together. Hey, there's something to this guy. He's kind of like Moses come back. And so what do? We're going to go make this guy king. Let's do with him exactly what Moses did for our ancestors. Moses came to our ancestors and he led them out of captivity to the Egyptians. This guy can give us bread too. Let's go get him to be our king so he can lead us out of captivity under the Romans. And you know what they're banking on here? You know what their faith is in here? This is number 4. This idea of being superior. Superiority. Superiority. It's this idea that, hey, if Jesus can give us bread, well then why can't he just give us some steak? Why don't we just up the ante a little bit and see if we can get some chicken wings? Something that, bread's great, but man, it'd be nice to have some gourmet coffee. Superiority. There's some people who kind of live the Christian life like this. They kind of tout Jesus as, man, he's here to give you the best of the best. He's here to kind of put you on top so that everything in life is great and wonderful all the time. The Jews wanted to be out of captivity to the Romans so they could be on top. They can live an unopposed life. Hey, we're on top. We kind of rule things around here. We're putting all of our faith into that. Jesus says, I'm not playing those games. That's not how my kingdom works. You and I, if we're not careful, we can turn the amazing things that Jesus does into this self-serving thing that he should make my life great and wonderful all the time. My spouse should be exactly the way I want him to be all the time. My kids should turn out exactly the way I want them to all the time. My job should be exactly what I want it to be. I should live in a nice car and drive a nice car and have a nice house. I should have the best of the best. I should be on top. We can do this. We can do this collectively. I think the American church is guilty of this. I think for so long, we have become so used to the culture, the society in general, being accepting of Christian values and morals and ethics, we've enjoyed life on top. And now we see those things shifting to where the culture more and more is not being generally accepting of Christian morals and values and ethics. You know what's interesting to me about that? I see a lot of fear coming up in Christians as a response to that. And you know what that would indicate to me? That perhaps for many Christians, the strength of their faith has been dependent upon being in the majority. We're on top. We live life unopposed. People are accepting of our values and our beliefs. And so what will happen to our faith when the culture begins to shift more and more away from it? Who knows where that's going? We have no idea. But I will say this: if your faith is dependent upon being in the majority, you're in a bad place. It's not how the Lord's kingdom works. It's the idea of superiority. It's where the Jews wanted to be. Hey, we're going to make him king so we can be on top. It's the idea of superiority. It doesn't satisfy. It doesn't fill. You can be on top and have everything going your way and still not have enough. There's a lot going on in this miracle. There's a lot of things that it exposes in our hearts. For some, it can expose a pursuit of entertainment. For some, it can expose an attempt to live on our own natural resources and abilities. For some, it can expose this just wanting to get our physical needs met. And for some, it can expose this idea of being superior, being on top, having a faith that gives us the best of the best all the time. It's interesting that this story begins and ends in the same place. It begins and ends with Jesus trying to get away, trying to withdraw, trying to be by himself. And so here's what I want to do. I want to end today by giving us a couple minutes of silent space to withdraw in our hearts and our minds. And here's the question that I'd like each of us to ask to the Lord. Which one of these four things have you been looking to lately to get filled up? Which one of those four things have you had a tendency to put in the place of Jesus? Or maybe you're here today and you've never given your life to Jesus. And you realize that whatever it is you're pursuing right now, whatever it is you're trying to track down to find life, is not working. And so today I would invite you to confess that to Jesus and come to him and be forgiven and be reconciled to the Lord and receive new life through him. So praise team, if you'll come on up and get hooked up and strapped up and whatever you do. The folks who are signed our prayer teams this week, if you'll go ahead and get in place. So we have people on the sides here who are willing and ready to pray with you should you need prayer. Robert and Susan, can y'all jump up over here? That'd be great. So here's what we're going to do. We're just going to take a couple minutes of silence to consider in our hearts and our minds which one of these things perhaps has been edging into our lives that we've been perhaps trying to use to put in the place of Jesus. Silence is uncomfortable, and that's okay. That's okay. Sometimes we need to be a little uncomfortable. So we'll take a couple of minutes of silence, then I'll pray, and then we'll sing and we'll close.